All right, so what are we going to talk about today? So, my name's Sarah. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and listen today. Thank you very much to Kevin for organising. So, this session, for around about 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to broadly talk about how to help people understand their relationship with their unique career paths and the way in which people can build a path for themselves that's going to bring them the best degree of job satisfaction they can get as they move throughout their career, or indeed careers, because most of us are going to have more than one career in our lifetime. The other way of describing this talk is that it really encourages people to think about what drives their own personal job satisfaction. In other words, it's really about how you work out what you love doing. Um, and the other thing to think about in this talk is it looks at things in the context of your personal values. For those of you who can hear, that's my cat in the background. So we're going to look at job satisfaction, your personal values, how you kind of marry the two in order to drive your own career path. So first of all, sorry about these slightly complicated charts. So Kevin and I were emailing backwards and forwards when we were talking about this talk, and I was talking about how the tenure, people's time they spend in their job roles, was getting shorter and shorter. So I decided to look into it a little bit more, and I came across this research. It's actually on the labour market in the US, but I think it probably translates to Europe as well. Um, and this is looking at average tenure for people in different age brackets, how long they spend time in their jobs across time since 1951 all the way through to 2022. And what we're really looking at in this chart is these two circles at the bottom right-hand side of each chart. So the left-hand chart is men in job, their average tenure in job roles in different ages throughout their lives. And the left-hand side is men and the right-hand side is women. And what we're really looking at here is these two figures that's showing that for men aged 25 to 34, their average tenure is 2.9 years and women is 2.7 years, so slightly less. And what it's actually telling us is since the 1980s, those figures haven't really changed. Our average tenure for young people working has not really changed since the 1980s. So it was a big kind of eye opener for me, because it's not true that the average tenure is for younger people is decreasing. It's pretty much been the same since the 1980s. So to kind of layer onto that context, if we assume that during the course of our career we want to attain mastery in one or a number of things throughout our working lives, and we agree with Malcolm Gladwell, who says we need to practice something for 10,000 hours in order to attain that mastery, and we take this average tenure of let's say we take the middle point between 2.7 and 2.9 years for men and women. So take the average as 2.8 years tenure in our 20s and early 30s. It would mean that we'd have to do roughly about 3 jobs in order to attain that mastery. So we'd need to be in 3 jobs, do about 10,000 hours of practice to get to that level of mastery. And if we also assume it takes us about 6 months to learn how to do a new job, and it might take another 6 months for us to find our next job, it means that actually moving around roles more frequently could increase the amount of time it takes us to achieve that mastery. So I just wanted to kind of put some of the things we're going to talk about today into that context and get people to think about, do I really, really want to be moving roles very frequently, or do I want to spend a little bit more time in this role really, really suck all the knowledge I possibly can out of the people around me and make the most of what I'm doing in my current role before I move on to a new role. So that's just a little bit of context for what we're going to talk about. First, and we're going to do 3 tasks today. I'm hoping Kevin might help me out with the chat if he can do. He's gonna he's gonna say yes to me, hopefully. Let me go back to my slides. So first of all, first thing we're going to do is reflect a little bit on how we got to the roles that we're doing at the moment. So what I want people to think about is with the role that you're in at the moment, if you're freelance with the roles that you're in, how did you get there? Was it through your network? Did you make the most of an opportunity that arose? Perhaps you're a freelancer that's moved into a permanent role, and it's okay to kind of accept because most of us now have kind of what's called squiggly careers. So we don't take a completely linear path where we're going from junior to mid to senior in a single organization across our lives. So I'm going to find the chat. What I'd like people to put in the chat, if we can, whilst we're doing this, is some comments about, how you ended up in your current role. Um, and in the meantime, whilst you're thinking about that, I just want to talk a little bit about how I started out and the decision making I went through when I was thinking about my first few jobs. So I'm 25 years into working now, which feels like about 200 years. And now I spend my time being a chairperson and a non-exec director for mostly digital and creative agencies. But before that, I spent 20 years working in digital agencies in project management and managing director roles. But my very first job was for a digital agency that made websites for graduate recruitment campaigns. And I was really, really lucky. We had very big name clients. We worked for quite famous brands. And I thought that if I worked on big name clients with big name agencies, that would boost my career and it would look good on my CV and it would look good for when I came to get my new role. And I also kind of conflated um, my personal job satisfaction with working for big name clients on big projects. What I didn't really understand was that um, what I actually loved about my job was growing the business and hiring new people and watching the business as it grew and changed. And what I spent most of my 20s and 30s doing is kind of getting that deep understanding of where I derived my job satisfaction. So when it came to me getting my second job, I kind of looked at what my friends were doing. Everybody had spent like a couple of years in their first job, and then they just assumed they had to go out and get a second job. And I really thought that I just needed a big name agency on my CV, and I needed to get some other big name clients on my CV. But what I understood as time went on was where I really, really kind of derived my job satisfaction from was growing the business that I was in and growing the teams that I was in. Um, so one of the things I wanted us to do today is to think about how we make those decisions and how we make those kind of next role decisions based on what gives us job satisfaction and how we layer on our kind of personal values to that. So let's think about how we work out what we love doing. Um, So, as I mentioned before, I love growing businesses and I love watching the people who manage those businesses, the senior leadership teams, grow within those businesses. That's what I love achieving, and that's where I kind of derive my job satisfaction from. So one of the things I wanted the folks listening today to think about was a recent time where something that you did or something that happened in the workplace made you feel good. Um, that kind of like deep sense of achievement you get from something that happens. Now, this could be a creative thing, could be something that you've shipped, could be something that's happened in the broader business that's made you feel good. I'm just going to have a very quick look at the comments. Here we go. Oh, bless Mark, haven't got a job. Well, this will be very interesting for you. So yeah, pop some ideas in the comments if you have um, an idea of where you kind of really derive your deep job satisfaction from. And that's something to have a think about. Um, Just go to the next slide. So when I start to think about it for myself, what I try to do is start to map out what that looks like to me, which is a really useful thing to refer back to when you're making decisions about what route to go down in your career. Because ideally, as your career develops, you want to end up doing more and more of what gives you that joy, what gives you that job satisfaction. So you can start doing this for yourself. This is just my one. Um, I think the last thing to say about this area is that what you deeply love about your work is highly likely to change over time. So one of the areas in particular that I've struggled with at points in my career is finance. So I don't come from a finance background or I don't have an accounting background, but I found myself in roles where I had to really understand management accounts, how audits worked, and how to interpret financial data. So I went through two really big learning curves in relation to understanding finance. So that journey looked a bit like this. So I moved to Australia in 2010 and I managed a business there. And I'd managed teams and profit and loss accounts in the past, but I'd never been responsible for managing a whole legal entity, a whole business. So it was a really, really steep learning curve. And then after that, I was involved in selling a business. And again, that was a really, really steep learning curve. So those two periods of time at points were, to be honest, really deeply uncomfortable. They pushed me out of my comfort zone. So I think it's useful to think of those times where you've had to learn something new. Perhaps it's made you feel really uncomfortable, but you've come out of it the other side, and you've learned to love parts of it. So I'm really glad that I went through those periods of like intense learning in my career because they allow me to do what I do now, which I really, really enjoy. So this kind of concept also relates to the whole idea of lifelong learning. So I think it's always important to be challenging yourself by learning new things, pushing yourself out of your comfort zone a bit. Um, Although I would say it's good to have a balance between, your work life can't every day be pushing yourself massively out of your comfort zone. You need that balance between a sort of day to day job satisfaction and learning the new stuff. Um, I'd also say that those of us working kind of broadly in the tech industry, we're in a really privileged position because the roles that we do offer us a really wide range of learning experiences and potential learning routes that we could go down. Um, I used to think of my role as being split between these kind of spinning plates. So I was a managing director and I had to spin all of these different plates. And I knew that I wasn't an expert in any of these fields, but I had to spin some of them harder. I had to focus on learning some of them harder because I was coming from a sort of a low base of knowledge. So I think that's also an interesting thing to have a think about. um, as particularly in relation to job satisfaction, you're going to gravitate towards the plates where that you enjoy spinning more. Um, so yes, just another thing to think about in relation to the areas that bring you job satisfaction. The other thing I wanted to pick up on today is how important your core values are to your career decisions, and how you can kind of layer those onto those areas that you really um, derive job satisfaction from. So these are my top three values. And when I so they're adventure, integrity, collaboration, and you can kind of see how those layer onto me finding a lot of job satisfaction out of growing teams and growing businesses. I absolutely love collaborating with people in order to help them grow their businesses. So when I look at my core values, I try to line them up or layer them onto the businesses I work with. And what I'm looking for there is an overlap and where there's common ground. So it'd be highly unlikely for me to take a role in a business where I can't see the the common ground between my core values and the business's values. And when there is a lot of common ground, that's where I know I'm going to derive even more job satisfaction from the work that I do. So, for those of you who are in managing teams or in teams, this is an exercise that you can actually do with your teams. This is this big list of values you can find online. You can Google core values lists really easily. Um, and the exercise is you take your sheet and you select your top 15, and then you whittle it down to 10, and then you eventually you whittle it down to 3. It doesn't actually take an awful long time to do, but it's a really useful exercise to do in a group because there's no right or wrong answers. And then what you can do is you can go around and it's a very good exercise to understand the different people in the teams that you're working with, and what their different values are. So we talked a bit about core values. We talked about what gives you real job satisfaction. The last thing I want to talk about is saying yes and creating opportunity. So if we understand what we really love doing and we understand our values, it makes it easier to spot opportunities, and makes it easier for us to put our hand up and say, I'm really interested in being involved in that particular thing. So I would really advocate that we all think about taking opportunities that will give us more job satisfaction and will tie in with our core values. The other thing to think about when we're thinking about um, making the most of opportunities is who or what can help us do that, who or what can help us understand the context in which we take those opportunities. So help can come in many forms. I'm a really big believer in having a series of internal and external mentors throughout your career. So, internal mentors might be a senior person in the business, could be your boss. I think there's always a degree of limitation to the amount of impartial advice they're able to give you because obviously they're already an employee of the same business. So, that's where external mentors can come in. I've had a handful of external mentors throughout my career. Some have been good and some not so good. So it's actually quite good to shop around for the right person. But the good ones tended to give me really clear, practical advice. And they also asked me the big questions. One in particular was a really brilliant networker. So she was very good at putting me in touch with lots of other people um, to help me network better throughout my career. These are two resources that I have used in order to help me kind of navigate career choices. So, first one here is a book called Playing Big by a lady called Tara Moore. It has a whole chapter in it where she introduces you to the concept of having an inner mentor who gets you to visualize where you are going to be in 20 years' time in your career, which is actually quite a difficult thing to do. So, very, very much recommend that book. It says it's for women. It's not for women. It's for anybody. The other course that I did actually in lockdown was Yale University's Science of Wellbeing, which is a free course. Millions of people have signed up for it, but it really, really kind of makes you think about your job and your career and your role and what you do in relationship to well-being and what makes you happy. So those are two things that you can have a look at. Um, the other thing that obviously this will go on the You Got This site as well is all of the things I talked about today. You can start to kind of build up a picture of that will help you to inform your career choices. So you could have a sheet like this. You list your top values in it. You think about what gives you job satisfaction. You've got a section for writing your mentors down and what opportunities you'd like to take and the goals that you have for this year. So that's something that you can take away and use or use with your teams. I'm on 22 minutes, which is pretty good, I think. Kevin, over to you.